Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 3, Episode 2 of The Umbrella Academy. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I do love that Luther's kind of on his run, and that the entire episode, the rest of his family, as Luther kind of puts it later on, no one cares anymore. They stopped caring after a while. And so it's like you have to go through so much to kind of bring that whole family together. But Luther was going the entire episode, and everyone was, I mean, to be fair, everyone's dealing with their own thing. But the fact is, no one knew where he was, and they're like, wait, where's Luther? Who cares? We're not going to wait for him. So poor Luther, and he's up there thinking like, don't worry, my family's going to rescue me. And he's just lying to himself the entire time. But I love that he is the lovable oaf. He's the lovable idiot that, you know, it's like, oh, the Sparrow Academy's welcoming him in, and he's like, oh wow, this is amazing. Oh, do you have that type of spread? It's like, oh, we got butter spread, we got almond spread. He's enjoying. He's like, well, you know, I'll partake in this and stuff like that. And obviously he brings up the whole Ben thing, like, right, our Ben, he died 15 years ago. He talked some of this with Sloane. I'm curious if he go into the full story of like, right, we're from a different timeline and stuff like that. We'd see that they were being watched and recorded, but who knows how much of that conversation got recorded. And it's like, right, shouldn't that change your perspective on the Umbrella Academy a little bit? Not look at them as enemies because they're kind of you if you didn't exist, because they're from a timeline where you guys didn't exist. Or maybe you did, but you just never got adopted. Whatever the case may be. Well, at least by not Reginald. But Luther's just kind of enjoying himself, especially because he's spending so much time with Sloane. And he's just like, oh my god, this facility is amazing because it looks so much better than theirs. It is interesting that their dad like never really went above and beyond with them like the way he does the Sparrow Academy. It's kind of spared no expense in that regard. But even Sloane being so excited by the fact is that Luther went to the moon, he's like, man, no one else ever cares about that. They're like, oh yeah, the moon, whatever. Which is kind of sad, and because there's actually a sweet element to it that every time Allison stares at the moon while she was with Ray, it was her way of kind of thinking about Luther. Because everyone always knew, like, oh, that's where Luther is. He's on the moon. Which he never got to the sad aspect of it. It was like, right, your dad sent you to, well, no, I said that, I think I brought that up last episode. It's like, he thought like their dad sent him to the moon for no reason. I think it was like I'm trying to remember, because obviously the moon ends up being how the apocalypse happens, but I don't remember if that's what he knew, because he was just keeping all of Luther's reports and stuff, so I don't remember the ins and outs of that from season 1 about how that whole thing worked out. Whether that really was just kind of keeping him busy, or was there actually a reason behind it, I don't remember now. Do correct me in the comments down below. But because that whole thing kind of made him eventually lose his sense of purpose. And he even talked about it eventually after their Ben died. Everyone kind of scattered. Even he stopped caring about being number one. It defined him. It was kind of his only character trait. He took pride in it, and he kind of built himself around that, you know? And it's like now, like, he kind of had nothing else after the fact. But sadly, he found out like, oh, you're just trying to pump me for information. She was really just playing up for the cameras because she knew they were watching, so she had to pretend like she was pumping him for information, but she just wanted to really get to know him. And so, obviously, he's getting the threats of, hey, if, because they're under the impression like, oh, we haven't seen Marcus, he got taken, so the last person to see him was with Vanya. And I love Luther being like, oh, Vanya? Well, Vanya's not the type to kidnap someone and do something like that. I do love that he also points out, he never says it, but it's like, yeah, his other siblings are more likely to do that than Vanya, but Vanya isn't that type. But he's like, nah, just let me go back. We'll find, you know, we'll figure out what this is all about. You know, we'll get answers to find out. And then, you know, let me just go back, talk to my siblings, and we'll, you know, send Marcus on his way. But it's like, no, you're not going anywhere. And so they do let him go later on. Because they're like, right, give a warning to your siblings. If anything happens to Marcus, we're coming after all of you together. It's like, oh, okay. And it's just like, right, it seems like your siblings aren't coming for you. It's like, you kind of feel so bad for Luther. But they gave him a gift bag as he was leaving. And he just doesn't know what to do if he's almost like, what? Like, okay, once again, very different from the Umbrella Academy. It's almost like, yeah, thanks for kind of taking, we hope you enjoyed your stay and stuff like that. It's like, oh, this is so weird. But I did think it was kind of cute, the whole him and Sloane thing, which are almost like, oh, it kind of reminds me of Nate. I mean, well, not just Nate. Every one of them's kind of got a relationship out of time. I mean, even Five had the whole Dolores thing. Allison had Ray. Vanya had Sissy. Klaus had... What's his name? Brian? I actually don't remember now. I'm blank. I just rewatched season 2 and I don't remember now. The guy he met during Vietnam. I'm actually blanking on his name now. Jeez. Ben had Jill. But yeah, like everyone kind of had someone. The only person who didn't have someone, I mean, because obviously he was still in love with Allison, but that's kind of who Luther had. But now he's got Sloane, but it's like, yeah, they keep falling in love with people kind of in the wrong time periods. And you know, when this is all said and done, that's going to be depressing on many different levels because it depends on how this gets resolved. Once again, are we dealing with a timeline A and timeline B coexist? Or are we dealing with timeline B to exist, timeline A had to be erased. So all there is timeline B, meaning if they restored a timeline either they bring timeline A back or they can create a new timeline C, and timeline B gets deleted. So that's also like uber depressing. So you get the feeling like it's not going to work out because none of the relationships for this family ever work out. I didn't even talk about, but let's not forget Diego and Lila too, but at least she's here. He's kind of fortunate enough that his significant other followed them there. I guess you could say Five got lucky because he eventually met Dolores, you know, years and years before decades before he actually eventually met her. Well, I don't think it was, well, yeah, but still. But I think it's really cute them making out. It's just a thing of like either like she's just doing that on purpose or maybe because they're so caught up in the moment she starts levitating both of them, and I'm like, oh, that's actually super cute. Once again, it's just an interesting parallel to like him and Allison to some extent. So I think that's kind of interesting. You're kind of like, hey, Luther, you deserve to be happy. Everyone deserves to be happy because no one's kind of happy right now because everyone's kind of like, yeah, going through it. First, let's talk about Victor, because this episode answered a question I had last episode. Once again, I'm watching these one at a time. So last episode, I had asked, I was like, oh, is Elliot just going to play Vanya as just like the way he played Vanya previously? Or, because I was under the impression, like I said, I heard something a while back that they probably weren't going to do that, but I guess they are. So like now, Vanya is Victor, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Which, I mean, obviously that parallels very nicely that character story arc. I mean, they probably crafted it like that because I've never read the comics. I don't know if Vanya's story necessarily goes, I mean, probably doesn't go down the Victor route, but the parallel of like, I mean, I think the whole story is a journey of self-discovery for all the siblings. So, but obviously it's just a nice parallel of Victor's story with Elliot's own story. Of like being able to get yourself finally out of that box that Victor and Sissy talked about last season, because Victor found out that Sissy ended up dying in '89. I don't know if they specify specifically 1989, so it makes you wonder, she must have gotten pregnant then, because of what we find out later on. So she must have, well, she already had Harlan, and we still haven't gotten an answer to that, but I'm still thinking that old man that Allison ended up bumping into, same dude from the previous episode, I think that's got to be Harlan. But whatever, his abilities seem more like ice or whatever, whereas Harlan seemed like he has some kind of levitation, so we don't know. But that's interesting to know, like, because once again, I was like, the moment she died on October 1st, I was like, wait, isn't that their birthday? And it's like, yeah, it is, specifically 1989, so there's definitely more to that. But first and foremost, like now, because I knew, because just in the trailers and stuff, I knew that Victor had shorter hair. Because I know Vanya in the comics have short. I think Vanya has like a pixie cut almost. So that's what I was wondering if there was like, oh, like you kind of match a little bit. But it's like, no, I mean, obviously it's just Elliot, the character reflecting Elliot's own transition and situation as well. So. But anyway, I thought that was, the family, those who were there, Five, Klaus. I feel like Klaus being who he is, too, he's very, like, open and, like, when love is love, man. Like, I feel like him out of anyone would also But also, right, you're a family member. We're happy for you, Victor. And I thought that was beautiful. Even Allison kind of beating herself up later on, be like, "How I feel like such an asshole for not knowing." But it's like, shut up for 2 seconds. How could you know when I didn't even really know? But it's like everything with Sissy made him go like, "No, I think this is who I really am." And it's really heartbreaking because, like, I mean, and I wonder, once again, parallels, I wonder, did Elliot ever feel like this in real life? Because it plays so true to the character of Vanya, it's hard to say whether or not that's even just like an Elliot thing, or if that actually is the character of Vanya, now Victor. Where, like, as Vanya, Victor had so many, like, self-esteem issues, considering their upbringing, never feeling comfortable in their own skin. That's very true to the character, all right. So, like, I think Elliot's story, like, fits very naturally with, but that's also the thing I was wondering, like, was the story of that character from the comics crafted more so around Elliot's story, and it just because it fits too perfectly. Like, I know you get what I'm saying. Like, that character already felt like, oh, like, this character kind of felt out of place considering their upbringing and just everything. Like, being with Sissy awakened something inside of them, and now Victor's able to be like, no, I'm me. I'm finally able to see me for the first time, because he's like, I used to think, maybe it was just me who hate looking in the mirror and seeing themselves, which I'm like, oh, I get that. Like, my circumstances being more so just like a low self-esteem. That's kind of what my circumstances kind of like bleed over from. But so I kind of connected with the character, and I was like, yeah, I really don't like looking at my reflection either. So not looking, and it's, but it is nice that the entire family, like, supports Victor in that regard. So I thought that was pretty dope. Of course they wouldn't, it's like, right, you're family, and they're going to be by their family. They're going to be by each other's side. Even though they butt heads, even though they have their differences of opinions and all of that, they still are by each other's side when the time comes. I think it's interesting, too, that I did touch on it, might as well, is Allison kind of having a little bit of PTSD. Because while they were at that bar or whatever, or cafe or whatever, waiting for Marcus, like, when she was looking at the person behind the bar, she kind of saw someone, like, being like, oh, we don't serve your kind here, like she was back in the 60s again. And so obviously that triggered by the fact that she went home and didn't find Claire. In fact, there's a different family there, and she's just kind of like, wait, where's my daughter? So all of that is kind of just, because she even said it, like, she left Ray to come back here and be with Claire. Now she has neither. She came back to a timeline where Claire doesn't exist. It's not like she doesn't even have Claire. Claire doesn't even exist. That's even worse than, Because I was like, yeah, the chance would have to be that basically this timeline version of yourself and your husband would have had to get together and have Claire. Like, that would still have to work out. And in a new timeline, there's no guarantee, because not everything plays out exactly the same. Why would it? So, to be fair, Five's the only one who really knows the ins and outs of the time travel stuff. He's the one that's just kind of like, hey man, everyone avoid your doppelgangers, and he's like, oh man, retirement. It's like, yeah, running missions for dad, then the commission, being on my own for like 45 years in that time frame, now trying to stop two apocalypses. It's like, dude, I deserve some time off. I'm going to take some time off. I'm done. I'm retired. I'm done with all this timey-wimey shenanigans. I'm just going to kick back and relax. It's like, well, you are at pretty much retirement age regardless. I mean, granted, you're a little younger, because even so, he's like 58, 59. So it's like, yeah, you're not quite retirement age, but considering all the hard work you put in, it's like, yeah, you and your siblings deserve to take a break. So that was interesting. At the same time, you had Diego hanging out with Stan. And I was curious because it's like, well, both of Stan's parents are superpowered people, so you'd assume that powers are hereditary, and it seems like they might be. I don't know whether Stan's adopted Lila's abilities or Diego's, because later on he grabbed one of Diego's knives and threw it at Alphonse, and I'm like, oh, that seemed like pretty accurate throwing. So I'm like, I don't know if he got Diego's power or whether it's just he has Lila's power and just copied Diego's. We still haven't found that out. I was almost wondering if there was going to be something superpower related to like the ooze coming out of his ear. I'm like, is that a power? He's like, no, he just has an ear thing that he needs medication for it. And Diego, being the reluctant father, being like, all right, you're cramping my style. Get yourself together, you little shit. All right, fine, let's go get your medication. And he's like, no, I need the name brand. He decides to go kick Alphonse out. He's like, oh, well, ain't this a coinky dink? And Diego's like, your dick dink's the only one I see. And they had both problems because he's like, yeah, that didn't come out the way you wanted it to. Yeah. And so they tussle. Once again, still don't fully understand. It seems like you have to hit Alphonse in a very specific place to trigger that reflex. It doesn't seem like it's applicable to the rest of his body. It has to be like, I guess, in that neck area, which I love. His chin comes off at one moment. He's like, bro, your chin's on it. He's like, yeah, that happens sometimes. It's like, and then 6, Jamie, because I remember her name now, was just kind of doing her own thing. It's like, right, you called the Umbrella Academy mess up. It's like, the Sparrows can be just as jacked up too. It's just kind of like, you're not even helping your brother. You're just going like, yeah, all right. You're just kind of watching and the spectacle and stuff. And then she steps in, but then luckily Stan is helping out. So Diego wasn't kind of going at it alone. So that was actually kind of cool. And Diego's like, Stan's like, come on, we're kicking their asses. And it's like, no, if you fight to run away, to live to fight another day. And he's like, yeah, that's some lame ass shit. And Diego's like, yeah, I know. That kid is a lot more like him than he would ever admit. But it's also sad, too, because he's having all these kid issues, like, still being like, oh, I'm the alleged dad. And it's like, yeah, you're having all these kid problems in front of your sibling who had kids, who had a daughter, is now missing that daughter. And Victor had to be, like, almost looking at Diego like, what the fuck is your problem, dude? You know what Allison's going through, and here you are complaining about your kid, dude? Come on, think, bro. So, all the while that's happening, you have Klaus deciding to go look for his biological mom, and he's bringing 5 along, thinking it's going to be like a journey and stuff like that. I guess, to be fair, any like traveling 5 did, it was always for the commission, so he didn't get to really just enjoy it. There was always a mission that kind of took precedent, that like he dived deep into work, and that he kind of let it consume him for all those years, right? So I guess that's why, like, later on when he wants to see like the world's largest ball of yarn or whatever, he was kind of excited by it. But Klaus had decided that he wanted to see his mom, which we find out basically at some point his dad had hidden, like, had Pogo put all the valuable stuff inside of a safe. So he tried to break into his dad's office to find the safe key, but ended up finding pay stubs related to the people getting paid off. And he's like, yeah, my mom got $3,000 from me. He's like, why didn't she hold out for at least like 5 or 6K at the very least? Yeah, but now it's like, right, he doesn't have Ben, he doesn't have the love that he had previously, and it's like, right, we don't even have the Umbrella Academy. So at a point when I kind of have nothing, I decided I wanted to kind of, it's a journey of self-discovery. It always kind of has been, but even more so in all of them kind of finding themselves. I think this is going to be the season of finding yourself. Once again, it's like, yeah, that's kind of always been an element of all the seasons, but I feel like in this one in particular, because Klaus is like, right, I'm going to get to learn a side of myself that I didn't know exists, because, like, my mom. And he goes off and turns out his mom's Amish. And for him, he's like, that makes a lot of sense. He ultimately ends up, I love the whole like, run-in with the Amish people, and he's like, well, just so you know, you forever tarnished the Amish in my head, and that's on you. But the lady he ran into, I thought like, oh, is that actually his mom pretending not to be? In fact, it's his aunt. Which she immediately was like, oh my God, like, because it turns out his mom died on October 1st, and you're like, what? I was like, the day he was born, she never actually had a child in this continuity because she died before she could give birth, and you're like, that's weird. Which then kind of answers some questions I had before. Why the number of children that Reginald went after? Once again, I don't remember the number off my top of my head, but it definitely wasn't 16. It was way higher. Whether it was in the 40s, whether it was in the 60s. I feel like it could have been in the 60s, but I might be conflating that with other numbers. Like Jane from Doom Patrol, how she has 63 personalities. I could be conflating that number with this. But either way, the reason why there's such a massive difference is a lot of them died, didn't they? So you're like, oh, snap. Because now, like, the moment 5 heard about that, he was like, wait, what? She died on the day you were supposed to be born. Let me see. get back to the hotel, everyone's gathered around, and it's like, right, we're dealing with the grandfather of all paradoxes, because now they're jumping into a timeline where they exist in a timeline they shouldn't exist because they're dead. So it's like, cool. So I guess that's the main reason why the paradox thing that's happening underneath the potential academy is happening is because you're not just in any like some timeline where like things are different. You're in a timeline where you don't exist, and I guess it's throwing off the space-time continuum or something. Maybe that'll be how they really kind of break that down. Then there's the whole situation with Grace. She's actually kind of feeding the thing. She's like, oh, let me feed you like your favorite. I mean, she's like, I didn't know what you would want. I mean, you did make everything. I'm like, Grace was kind of off in season 1, obviously because her programming, but it's like, this is next level, like, creepy weird. I mean, it's so interesting. I was about to say very cult-like, but I'm like, well, we already saw that with Klaus, who started a cult last season. But yeah, there's just, why is her programming thinking that this is okay? Like, does something happen to trigger? Like, what's up with that? Or is that just like, no, it's just part of her faulty programming? Just the way she was in season 1, I guess it's just like she's latching onto this and believing it's something more to it, something good when it's not, or maybe she doesn't even care or think it's good or bad. She thinks it's God and that's all that she needs. I mean, maybe because of that she does think it's good. I don't know what to really make of that. There's even a picture of Marcus down there, so it makes you wonder, is that her way of kind of paying tribute of like, oh yes, Marcus was sacrificed to the great God that's beneath, like in the basement. Which I love that it's like, oh, you guys are supposed to be the heroes and stuff, and yet you're completely unaware of what's happening. Because slowly but surely, because even 5 started picking up, it's like, wait, there were like 3 lobsters in that tank. Where did they go? And the guy put up a poster for his missing dog, and sadly doesn't know his dog's not missing. His dog's been evaporated and killed. And we saw a whole field of cows die. You're like, wait, why is that happening? Once again, why is the Umbrella Academy not affected? Is it because they technically don't belong in this timeline, so it gives them some initial immunity from it or something? I'm curious. Because it's like, right, you don't belong here, so the rules are kind of a little... So, but maybe, once again, I get... Because it seems like it's reaching out further and further. And like I said, I think it's going to be to the point, once it expands to the entire Earth and then retract, that's when we're in full-blown, everything ends, collapses upon itself, everything and everyone dies. I think that's when we get to that point, is then and there. But, either way, I'm fascinated to kind of really fully understand it. That's my theory. I brought that up last episode. I think that's when you have to really worry. That's when the end game comes, is when it expands the entire world and then retracts. That's going to be the end of everything. And there's also Lila, which I guess Lila might be in the same boat, considering like, well, that also breaks, well, I guess I was about to say, their Ben died. So that might protect this timeline's Ben, because their timeline Ben isn't in this timeline. He's dead. So that makes this Ben not a paradox, I guess, technically speaking. So maybe he actually will potentially die, which would be kind of sad that, yeah, that's another timeline where Ben dies. I'm interested to find out, but that would assume, once again, that begged the question I had previously. Like, well, how does that work with the commission? It's like, because obviously this is their Lila, but I'm like, 5 never was born, because 5 never went off, and because he never joined the Umbrella Academy, he never went on to join the commission. So that's why I was like, things are a little wonky. What is the commission like? Because the commission exists, I don't think it doesn't exist outside of time, does it? I'm sure they definitely didn't bring that up during season 2, but it might have been something they covered in season 1, that maybe it's kind of like the time masters in DC's Legend of Tomorrow, they exist in a vanishing point outside of time and space. So maybe it's kind of a similar thing, because like, I mean, does a commission even exist? Because is that just because I feel like that has to be an outside of time thing, considering they oversee time. So why haven't they stepped in with all this? Maybe they're not around anymore. Maybe they got killed or deleted the moment this new timeline was created and the Umbrella Academy jumped into it. So many timey-wimey questions about all that, but my point is, the point I was going to make is, I love that Lila couldn't leave, and that, what was it? Mother cunt, bitch, fuck off. I'm like, Jesus. And there were like a whole bunch of kids around. It's like, wow. So she ended up stealing the suitcase of fives that they had at the Sparrow Academy. Now she has it. So I'm wondering, is she going to try and use it and it's still not going to work because time is kind of broken? Maybe that's why the original suitcase stopped working, and this one probably stopped working too. So they actually have no way of escaping things. They have to fix it here and now, or they're all doomed. Apocalypse 3.0. So either way, I'm very, very excited to see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.